What would make a 71-year-old piano teacher tremble in fear before touching a keyboard? What secret could be so powerful that it stayed buried for 3 decades? Picture this. A packed auditorium in a small Midwestern town. Hundreds of eyes fixed on a solitary figure seated at a gleaming grand piano. Stage lights pouring down like judgment itself. And there, in the center of it all, sits Ruth Bennett, her weathered hands hovering inches above the ivory keys, shaking like autumn leaves in a storm. The air is thick with anticipation, with tension so heavy you could cut it with a knife. Her chest rises and falls with rapid breaths. Beads of sweat form on her brow despite the cool air. The silence in that room is deafening. Waiting, watching, wondering. This is not the nervousness of an amateur. This is not stage fright. This is something far deeper, far more profound. This is the fear of a woman about to expose a lifetime of carefully guarded secrets. A woman about to resurrect a ghost she thought she'd buried forever. One touch of those keys would change everything. One note would shatter 30 years of silence. One performance would reveal the truth about who Ruth Bennett really was. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, why her hands trembled with such fear and such longing, we need to go back. Back to a life she thought she'd left behind forever. Back to a name that once echoed through the world's greatest concert halls. Back to a story of extraordinary talent, devastating loss, and the long journey toward redemption. This is that story. On most Tuesday afternoons, you'd find Ruth Bennett exactly where she'd been for the past 28 years, in the modest music room of Maplewood Community Center, teaching piano to children whose fingers stumbled over scales and whose attention spans wandered like butterflies. Maplewood, Iowa. Population 3,200. The kind of town where everyone knows your name, where the diner still serves coffee for $1, and where the biggest excitement is Friday night high school football. A town that time seemed to have forgotten, which was exactly why Ruth had chosen it. She lived in a small white house on Maple Street. Appropriate, given her name. A tidy garden out front. Wind chimes on the porch that sang gentle songs in the breeze. Inside, just the essentials. A modest kitchen, a cozy living room, and a small upright piano pushed against the far wall. Nothing fancy. Nothing that drew attention. Ruth herself seemed cut from the same cloth as her surroundings. Simple, unassuming. She wore comfortable cardigans in muted colors, sensible shoes. Her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked like everybody's grandmother. Safe, familiar, ordinary. But if you paid attention, really paid attention, you might notice something. Something in the way her fingers moved across the keys when she demonstrated a piece for her students. A fluidity, a grace, a depth of emotion that seemed almost impossible for someone just teaching Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to 7-year-olds. You might catch the faraway look in her eyes sometimes when a particular melody drifted through the room, as if the music transported her somewhere else, somewhere distant, somewhere painful. Her students adored her. Miss Ruth, as they called her, was patient, kind, encouraging. She never raised her voice, never showed frustration. When little Timmy forgot his sheet music for the 3rd week in a row, she simply smiled and said, "That's all right, dear. We'll work from memory today." The parents loved her too. "She's a gem," they'd say. "So dedicated, so gentle. We're lucky to have her." But none of them knew the truth. None of them could imagine that the quiet, unassuming woman teaching their children basic chord progressions had once commanded stages that seated thousands. that her fingers now patiently guiding small hands across keyboards had once brought audiences to tears with their power and precision. None of them had any idea that Ruth Bennett was not her real name, that she was living a carefully constructed lie, a necessary fiction, a protective shell around a past too painful to face. Why would someone with such obvious talent hide away in a town like Maplewood teaching beginners? What could drive a person to bury their gifts so deeply? The answer to that question would remain locked away for nearly 3 decades, until one curious student started asking questions. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, 15 years old, bright eyes, curious mind, the kind of student who actually practiced between lessons and asked questions that went deeper than, "How fast should I play this?" Sarah had been studying with Miss Ruth for 5 years. She'd progressed from simple children's songs to tackling Beethoven sonatas. And in all that time, she'd noticed something that puzzled her. Whenever Sarah struggled with a difficult passage, Miss Ruth would demonstrate. And when those weathered fingers touched the keys, something magical happened. The notes didn't just sound correct. They sang. They soared. They told stories. There was a depth there, a mastery that seemed beyond what a small-town piano teacher should possess. One Tuesday, in late September, Sarah arrived early for her lesson. Miss Ruth wasn't in the music room yet, so Sarah browsed the small bookshelf of sheet music. That's when she saw it. An old book. Worn leather cover. Pages yellowed with age. Brahms variations. Sarah pulled it from the shelf, and something fluttered out. A newspaper clipping. Old. Fragile. The paper had that brownish tint that comes with decades of aging. Sarah picked it up carefully and froze. The headline read, "Rising Star, Rebecca Williams Captivates Carnegie Hall." There was a photograph, black and white. Grainy, a young black woman seated at a grand piano, her head tilted back slightly, lost in the music. The image was faded, but Sarah could make out elegant features, high cheekbones, graceful neck, and something about the eyes. Those eyes. Sarah looked closer. Her heart started racing. She knew those eyes. She'd seen them countless times looking at her with patience and encouragement during lessons. Older now, creased with age, but unmistakably the same. "Sarah, dear, I'm so sorry I'm late." Sarah jumped. The clipping fell from her hands and fluttered to the floor. Miss Ruth stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Then her gaze dropped to the newspaper clipping lying face up on the worn carpet. The color drained from her face. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "Miss Ruth, is this you?" The older woman's hands trembled slightly. She walked slowly into the room, bent down and picked up the clipping. She stared at it for what felt like an eternity. When she looked up, her eyes were glistening with unshed tears. "That was a very long time ago," she said quietly. "A different life, a different person. But it is you, isn't it? You're Rebecca Williams." Ruth, or Rebecca, or whoever she truly was, sank into a chair. She looked suddenly smaller, older, more fragile than Sarah had ever seen her. "I was," she whispered. "Once upon a time, I was Rebecca Williams. But that girl died a long time ago. Now I'm just Ruth, just a piano teacher in a small Iowa town. And I'd appreciate it if we could keep it that way." But Sarah couldn't let it go. Over the following weeks, she did what any curious teenager in the internet age would do. She researched. She dug. She searched old archives and music databases. And what she found was extraordinary. Rebecca Williams hadn't just been good, she'd been phenomenal. Reviews from the 1980s called her a once-in-a-generation talent. A pianist who doesn't just play the notes, but channels the very soul of the composer. She'd performed at Carnegie Hall, Kennedy Center, Royal Albert Hall. She'd recorded albums that won critical acclaim. She was destined for legendary status. And then, in 1994, she vanished. Completely. No more performances, no more recordings, no explanation. It was as if Rebecca Williams had simply ceased to exist. What could make someone walk away from all of that? What tragedy could be so profound that it would cause a rising star to abandon everything and disappear into obscurity? Sarah was determined to find out. Not out of malice, not to expose Miss Ruth against her will, but because she sensed that this secret was a weight her teacher had been carrying alone for far too long. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to set that burden down. To understand Ruth Bennett, we need to go back 50 years. Back to Philadelphia, 1974. Back to a cramped apartment in a working-class neighborhood where a young girl named Rebecca Williams sat at a battered upright piano, her small fingers picking out melodies she'd heard on the radio. Rebecca was 8 years old, the youngest of 4 children. Her father worked double shifts at the steel mill. Her mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. They had little, but they had music. Her grandfather played blues guitar. Her grandmother sang in the church choir every Sunday. Music wasn't just entertainment in their home. It was survival. It was joy. It was hope. The piano had been a gift from a neighbor who was moving. It was old. Several keys stuck. It was desperately out of tune. But to Rebecca, it was magic. She taught herself at first, picking out tunes by ear, creating her own melodies. Her mother noticed the gift immediately. The way Rebecca could hear a song once and recreate it perfectly. The way her little hands seemed to instinctively understand rhythm and harmony. When Rebecca was 9, her mother did something extraordinary. She took every extra penny she'd been saving for a new winter coat and paid for Rebecca to have lessons with Mrs. Thornton, a retired music teacher who lived 3 blocks away. Mrs. Thornton was a stern woman, demanding, uncompromising. But she recognized genius when she saw it. And Rebecca Williams was something special. This child, Mrs. Thornton told Rebecca's mother, after just 3 lessons, has a gift I've seen maybe twice in 40 years of teaching. She doesn't just play the piano. She speaks through it. The lessons continued. Rebecca devoured everything Mrs. Thornton taught her. Bach, Mozart, Chopin, Beethoven. She practiced until her fingers ached, until her mother had to physically pull her away from the piano to eat dinner or go to bed. By age 12, Rebecca was performing in local recitals. By 14, she'd won every youth competition in Philadelphia. By 16, she'd earned a full scholarship to the prestigious Curtis Institute of Music, one of the most selective music schools in the world. They accepted fewer than 5% of applicants. Rebecca wasn't just accepted. She was courted. College was a whirlwind. Intense practice sessions, masterclasses with world-renowned pianists, performances that grew increasingly important, increasingly visible. The classical music world began to take notice. Rebecca Williams was something they hadn't seen in a long time. A young black woman with extraordinary technical skill combined with deep emotional resonance. In a field that was overwhelmingly white and male, she was breaking barriers. Not just participating, dominating. At 22, she made her professional debut at Carnegie Hall, the venue that had launched countless legendary careers. The reviews the next day were rapturous. The New York Times called her performance transcendent. The Philadelphia Inquirer declared her the most exciting young pianist in a generation. Opportunities exploded. Concert tours across America, Europe, Asia, recording contracts, television appearances. Rebecca Williams was becoming a star. Not just in classical music circles, but in the broader cultural conversation. She appeared on talk shows. Her face graced magazine covers. Young black girls saw her and dreamed of concert halls instead of just pop stardom. But success in classical music is demanding, punishing even. The practice required to maintain that level of playing is endless. The travel is exhausting. The pressure to constantly perform at the highest level is crushing. Many musicians burn out. Some turn to substances. Others simply walk away. Rebecca thrived. Not because it was easy, but because she loved it. Every moment at the piano felt like coming home, like breathing, like the most natural thing in the world. The music didn't drain her. It sustained her, fed her soul. And then in 1988, during a performance at Boston Symphony Hall, she met David. David Chen was a conductor, rising through the ranks. Brilliant, passionate about music in the same deep, soulful way Rebecca was. He was guest conducting that evening, and Rebecca was the featured soloist. Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most demanding, most beautiful pieces in the repertoire. The chemistry between pianist and conductor was electric. The music that night wasn't just performed, it was created, born fresh in that moment through their collaboration. The audience felt it, the orchestra felt it, and Rebecca and David felt it. They met afterward at the reception, talked for hours, discovered they shared not just a love of music, but similar backgrounds, similar struggles. David's parents had immigrated from Taiwan. He'd faced his own barriers in the classical music world. They understood each other in a way that few others could. The romance was swift, intense. Within a year, they were married. A small ceremony, close friends and family, and then back to the work they both loved. Sometimes performing together, sometimes pursuing separate projects, but always supporting each other, always returning home to their shared passion for music. For Rebecca, life had never been better. She was at the peak of her artistic powers. She was in love. She was making a difference, inspiring young musicians who looked like her to pursue their dreams. Every morning she woke up grateful. Every evening she fell asleep content. The world lay open before her like an unwritten symphony, full of possibility, full of promise, full of hope. She had no way of knowing that it would all come crashing down, that in just a few short years, her perfect life would shatter into pieces so small she'd never be able to put them back together, that the music that had always been her salvation would become unbearable, that she would have to disappear, to become someone else entirely, to bury Rebecca Williams so deep that even she could barely remember who that woman had been. November 15th, 1994. A date that would be seared into Rebecca's memory forever. The day that cleaved her life into before and after. The day the music died. It was supposed to be a simple trip. David was conducting in Chicago. Rebecca had a rare weekend free. No performances, no obligations, just time together. They decided to drive, take the scenic route, make a mini vacation of it. The weather was clear when they left Boston. Crisp autumn air, brilliant blue sky. They talked about everything and nothing on that drive. About the new Brahms recording Rebecca was planning. About David's upcoming appointment as assistant conductor with the Philadelphia Orchestra. About maybe finally starting a family. They stopped for lunch in Ohio, a small diner off the highway. Terrible coffee, but amazing pie. Rebecca teased David about his sweet tooth. He stole a bite of her apple pie when she wasn't looking. They laughed. God, they laughed so much that day. They got back on the road around 2 o'clock. David was driving. Rebecca had dozed off in the passenger seat, lulled by the rhythm of the highway and the warmth of the afternoon sun. She woke to the sound of screeching tires, the sickening crunch of metal, the sensation of spinning, and then nothing. When Rebecca regained consciousness, she was in a hospital room. Everything hurt. Her ribs, her head, her left arm was in a cast. But that pain was nothing compared to what came next. A doctor with kind eyes and a gentle voice sat beside her bed. "Mrs. Chen," he said softly. "I'm so sorry. Your husband didn't survive the accident. The impact on the driver's side was too severe. He died instantly. He didn't suffer." The words didn't make sense. Rebecca's brain couldn't process them. David, gone. Impossible. He'd been right there, right beside her, stealing her pie, making her laugh, planning their future. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not right. You're wrong. David is..." But even as she said it, she knew. Deep in her bones, she knew. The kind doctor wouldn't be here, wouldn't be looking at her with such pity unless it was true. David was dead, her husband, her partner, her best friend, the other half of her soul. Gone, in an instant, in a meaningless accident on an anonymous stretch of highway. The funeral was a blur. Rebecca moved through it like a ghost, accepted condolences she couldn't process, listened to eulogies she couldn't hear, watched them lower her husband into the ground, and felt like part of her soul went into that earth with him. The grief was total, consuming. It swallowed her whole. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. Her family tried to help. Friends tried to be there for her. But nothing penetrated the darkness. And worst of all, she couldn't play. The piano. The thing that had always been her refuge, her joy, her very identity. She couldn't touch it, couldn't bear to. Because music had been theirs, hers and David's. Every piece she'd performed, every note she'd played since meeting him had been infused with their shared love of the art. Now music was just a reminder, a cruel echo of what she'd lost. When she tried to play even simple scales, her hands would freeze, her chest would tighten, panic would rise in her throat. The notes that once flowed from her so naturally now felt like shards of glass cutting her from the inside. Her manager called. Gently at first, then more urgently. She had commitments, contracts, a performance at Kennedy Center scheduled for January, a recording session in February, a European tour planned for spring. Rebecca canceled everything, all of it. She sent back the advance payments, broke the contracts. Her manager was understanding at first. "Take all the time you need," he said. But as weeks turned to months, his tone changed. "Rebecca, I know this is hard, but you can't just walk away. You have responsibilities. Your career, she didn't care about her career. What good was any of it without David? What was the point of performing if he wasn't there to share in it? The music they'd made together, the life they'd built, it all felt meaningless now." By spring of 1995, Rebecca had made a decision. She couldn't be Rebecca Williams anymore. That woman, the brilliant pianist, the rising star, she was dead too. As dead as David. This grief, this brokenness, it had killed her just as surely as the accident had killed her husband. She sold her Boston apartment, sold most of her possessions, kept only what fit in her car. She withdrew her savings. And then she drove. West. Away from the memories. Away from the life that hurt too much to face. She didn't know where she was going, didn't care. She just drove. Through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. And finally, on a gray afternoon in late May, she found herself in a tiny town called Maplewood, Iowa. Population 3,200. A place so small, so quiet, so utterly anonymous that it felt like disappearing. She rented a small house, paid 6 months in advance, gave her name as Ruth Bennett. Bennett had been her grandmother's maiden name. Ruth was the middle name she'd always hated as a child. But Rebecca Williams needed to stay dead, and Ruth Bennett could be whoever she needed to be. Nobody special, nobody remarkable, just another middle-aged woman in a small town. Invisible. She got a job at the community center. They needed a piano teacher, someone to teach basic lessons to kids. Nothing fancy, nothing demanding. Perfect. And for 30 years, that's exactly what she was. Ruth Bennett, piano teacher. No performances, no recordings, no acknowledgement of her past. She played just enough to teach, just enough to get by. But never more. Never risking the flood of memories and pain that full immersion in music would bring. She built a life around her grief. Small, contained, safe. A life that asked nothing of her. A life that couldn't hurt her, because she'd already lost everything that mattered. Or so she thought. Until a curious teenage girl found an old newspaper clipping. Until the past she'd buried so carefully began to resurface. Until she was forced to confront the question she'd been avoiding for 3 decades. Could she ever be whole again? Or would she remain broken, hiding in plain sight for the rest of her days? The weeks following Sarah's discovery were tense, awkward. Sarah respected Miss Ruth's wish for privacy, didn't tell anyone what she'd learned. But during their lessons, the unspoken knowledge hung between them like a curtain, heavy, opaque. Miss Ruth seemed smaller somehow, more fragile. As if the secret had been holding her together, and now that someone knew, she might simply collapse. But Sarah noticed something else too. A hunger in her teacher's eyes when they worked on particularly beautiful pieces. A longing, as if part of Miss Ruth wanted to really play again. Not just demonstrate, not just teach, but truly fully pour herself into the music the way she once had. In October, the community center announced its annual holiday recital. It was a tradition. All the music students performed. Parents came. Grandparents came. The whole town showed up. It was sweet, low-key, nothing fancy. Kids in their Sunday best, stumbling through simple pieces while proud families applauded. Sarah's mother volunteered to help organize it, as she did every year. At dinner one night, she mentioned they were looking for someone to close the show. Usually we have Miss Ruth play something her mother said, just a carol or two, but she always says no, says the spotlight should be on the students. Sarah went quiet. An idea was forming. Crazy. Maybe impossible. But she couldn't shake it. The next Tuesday at her lesson, Sarah brought it up. "Miss Ruth," she said carefully, "I think you should perform at the recital." Ruth's hands stilled on the keys. "Sarah, we've been through this. I'm a teacher, not a performer, not anymore. But you were. And you still could be. I've heard you demonstrate pieces. You're incredible. Way beyond what any of us could ever hope to achieve. Don't you miss it? Even a little?" Ruth stood, walked to the window, stared out at the autumn leaves tumbling across the parking lot. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Every single day. I miss it every single day." "Then why?" "Because," Ruth's voice cracked, Because playing, really playing, it opens everything back up. All the memories, all the pain. For 30 years I've kept that door closed. I'm afraid if I open it even a crack, I'll fall apart completely. Sarah joined her at the window. Or maybe she said gently, maybe playing again is how you finally heal. Maybe the music isn't the thing you lost. Maybe it's the thing that can help you find yourself again. Ruth looked at her student. This wise, compassionate girl who somehow understood things beyond her years. I wouldn't even know what to play, she said. Play something that matters to you. Something that means something. Over the following weeks, others joined Sarah's campaign. Her mother, some of the other parents, even a few of Ruth's other students, not pushing, not demanding, just gently encouraging. We'd love to hear you play, Miss Ruth. It would mean so much to the kids to see their teacher perform. Just one piece, whatever you'd like. Ruth found herself thinking about it constantly. Late at night, lying in bed, she'd think about the recital, about standing on that small stage in the community center, about her hands on the piano keys. And she'd think about David, about how much he'd loved watching her perform, about the joy on his face when she played, about how he'd always said her gift was meant to be shared, that hiding it away would be like hiding a light under a basket. Would he want her to stay buried in grief, to waste the talent he'd so admired? Or would he want her to play, to live, to honor their shared love of music by making it again? One evening in late November, Ruth opened a box she kept in the back of her closet. She hadn't looked inside it in years. Photographs, programs from old performances, and there at the bottom, a piece of sheet music. Worn, marked with David's handwriting. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat, Major Opus 9, number 2. It had been David's favorite. He used to say it sounded like love itself, like every beautiful moment they'd shared distilled into music. Rebecca had played it at their wedding. The last time she'd performed it had been 3 days before the accident. She sat at her small, upright piano, the one she used only for teaching. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the keys. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were tentative, hesitant. Her fingers felt stiff, unfamiliar with the deeper expression the piece demanded. But then slowly, something shifted. Muscle memory took over. The music began to flow, and with it came the memories. David's smile, his laugh, the way he conducted with his whole body, the way he'd kiss her before every performance for luck, the life they'd built together, the love that had filled every corner of their shared world. Tears streamed down Ruth's face as she played, but for the first time in 3 decades, they weren't only tears of grief. They were tears of remembrance, of gratitude, of a love that had been real and beautiful and worth every moment of the pain that came after. When the last note faded, Ruth sat in silence. Her heart was pounding, her hands were trembling, but something had shifted inside her. A door she'd kept bolted shut had opened just a crack, and the light coming through, while painful, was also warm. The next day she found Sarah before their lesson. "I'll do it," she said simply. "I'll play at the recital." Sarah's face broke into the biggest smile Ruth had ever seen. "Really? Miss Ruth, that's amazing. What will you play Chopin?" "A nocturne, for someone I loved very much, someone who would have wanted me to play again." Word spread quickly through Maplewood. Miss Ruth was going to perform. The woman who'd taught their children for nearly 3 decades, who'd always stayed in the background, who'd always declined every request to play publicly. She was finally going to share her gift. The community center had to bring in extra chairs. The recital was usually a small affair, maybe 50 people. This year, they were expecting over 200. As the date approached, Ruth felt many things: fear, anticipation, grief, but also something she hadn't felt in 30 years. Excitement, the thrill of preparing for a performance, of polishing a piece until it's shown, of preparing to communicate something important through music. She practiced the Chopin every day, not obsessively as she once had, but lovingly, carefully. Each note a prayer, each phrase a memory, each dynamic marking a brushstroke in a portrait of the life she'd lived, and the love she'd lost, and the woman she was trying to become. The night before the recital, Ruth couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Tomorrow she would step onto a stage again. Tomorrow she would stop hiding. Tomorrow, Ruth Bennett and Rebecca Williams would finally, after 30 years of separation, become one person again. Was she ready? Could she actually do this? Or would she freeze up there, fall apart, prove to herself and everyone else that Rebecca Williams really was dead and gone? There was only one way to find out. December 18th. The Maplewood Community Center auditorium buzzing with excited chatter, folding chairs packed in tight, standing room only in the back. The whole town had turned out. The stage was simple. A worn blue curtain as a backdrop, a single spotlight, and center stage a beautiful grand piano. The community center had borrowed it from the high school for the occasion. It was the nicest instrument Maplewood had to offer. The recital began at 7 o'clock. One by one, students performed. Little Emma Chen played Jingle Bells with only 2 mistakes. Everyone applauded enthusiastically. Tommy Rodriguez made it through Silent Night, stopping twice to find his place, but finishing strong. More applause. Sarah Mitchell performed a Beethoven sonatina beautifully, her technique showing the care and skill her teacher had instilled. Ruth sat in the front row watching her students with pride, smiling encouragingly at each one. But her hands were clasped tight in her lap, trembling slightly, her heart hammering against her ribs. After the last student finished, there was a brief pause. Then Sarah walked to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said. "Before we close, we have a very special performance. For the first time in many years, our beloved teacher, Miss Ruth Bennett, has agreed to play for us. Please give her your warmest welcome." The applause was thunderous, genuine, filled with affection for the woman who'd patiently taught their children. Ruth stood. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The moment where 30 years of hiding would finally end. She walked slowly to the stage, each step feeling heavier than the last. Climbed the 3 stairs, crossed to the piano. The spotlight felt like heat from the sun. Blinding, exposing. She sat on the bench, adjusted her position, placed her hands in her lap, closed her eyes, took a long, deep breath. In her mind, she saw David, smiling at her the way he always had before her performances. "You've got this, Rebecca," he seemed to say. "Go show them what you can do." Her hands rose, hovered over the keys. And for just a moment, we returned to where this story began, to the question that opened everything. What would make a 71-year-old piano teacher tremble in fear before touching a keyboard? Now you know. This wasn't just a performance. This was resurrection. This was a woman who'd buried herself alive in grief, finally clawing her way back to the surface. This was the moment she chose to live again. Her fingers descended, touched ivory, and Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major began to fill the auditorium. The first notes were soft, gentle, almost fragile, as if Ruth was testing whether she could do this, whether the music would hurt too much. But as the melody developed, something remarkable happened. The stiffness left her shoulders. The tension melted from her face. Her fingers began to dance across the keys with a fluidity, a grace, a confidence that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her. This wasn't the playing of a small-town piano teacher. This was the playing of a master, every note perfectly weighted, every phrase shaped with exquisite taste, the dynamics ranging from whispers to powerful declarations. The rubato, that subtle push and pull of tempo executed with intuitive perfection. But more than technical mastery, there was emotion, raw, honest, profound. You could hear in the music 30 years of grief, of loneliness, of love that never died, of memories treasured and pain endured. Every note was infused with feeling, with life, with the story of a woman who'd lost everything and somehow found the strength to go on. The audience sat transfixed, barely breathing. Some had tears streaming down their faces without even realizing it. This wasn't just music. This was witnessing something sacred, something private made public, a soul bearing itself through melody and harmony. Sarah sat in the front row, tears flowing freely, her heart swelling with pride and awe. This was why she'd pushed Miss Ruth to perform. Not for the audience, but for her teacher. So she could remember who she'd been. So she could reclaim what she'd lost. As the piece built to its climax, Ruth's entire body was engaged, swaying slightly, leaning into the phrases, her face reflecting every emotion the music contained. She wasn't performing anymore. She was communing. She was praying. She was speaking to David across the void that separated them, telling him through music that she remembered, that she still loved him, that she always would. And then about 2/3 through the piece, something happened. In the back row, an older man sat very still, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. He was leaning forward in his seat, staring intently at the woman on stage. He'd come to the recital to support his granddaughter who'd played earlier. He'd lived in Chicago for most of his life, only recently moving to Maplewood to be near family. He'd been a music journalist in his younger years, had covered classical music for the Chicago Tribune, had attended hundreds of concerts, had interviewed countless musicians, and he recognized this playing, not just the skill, but the specific voice. The unique way this pianist shaped phrases, the particular emotional quality. He'd heard it before, decades ago, in Chicago, in New York, in Boston. His hands began to shake. He pulled out his phone, quickly typed into Google, Rebecca Williams pianist. Images loaded. He zoomed in on a photo from 1988, compared it to the woman on stage. The face was older, the hair gray instead of black, but the eyes, the way she held herself, the way her head tilted when she played. "Oh my God," he whispered. "That's her. That's Rebecca Williams." He wasn't the only one who noticed. A woman in the middle section had been a classical music enthusiast her whole life. She had albums, downloaded performances. She'd mourned when Rebecca Williams disappeared, and now listening to this performance recognition slowly dawned. But Ruth was oblivious to the stirring in the audience. She was lost in the music, in the memories, in the communion with her past and her pain, and the love that had defined her life. The piece moved toward its conclusion. The melody repeating ornamented each iteration, digging deeper into the emotional core, building to a final statement that was both heartbreaking and hopeful, grief and acceptance intertwined. And then the last note, soft, gentle, fading into silence like a breath exhaled. Ruth's hands remained on the keys, her eyes closed, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. For a moment, no one moved. The audience sat in stunned silence, still processing what they'd just witnessed. Then someone in the back row began to clap. Slowly. Then another person joined. Then another. And suddenly the entire auditorium erupted. Not just applause, a standing ovation. Thunderous. People weren't just clapping. They were cheering, crying, overwhelmed by what they'd heard. Ruth opened her eyes, looked out at the sea of standing people, at the tears on faces, at the joy and awe reflected back at her. For 30 years she'd hidden. And now exposed, she found not judgment, but love. She stood, bowed slightly, tears streaming down her own face. These weren't tears of grief. They were tears of release, of coming home, of finally allowing herself to be whole again. As she stepped off the stage, Sarah was there to embrace her. "That was beautiful, Miss Ruth. Thank you for sharing it with us." But before Ruth could respond, the older man from the back row approached. His face was flushed with excitement. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm sorry to intrude. But I have to ask, were you Rebecca Williams?" The auditorium went quiet, everyone turning to look. Ruth froze. For a moment, panic flashed across her face, the urge to deny, to retreat back into hiding. But then she looked at Sarah, at the audience, at all these people who'd just witnessed her pour her heart out through music. And she realized she was done hiding, done pretending, done living half a life. "Yes," she said quietly. Then louder, "Yes, I was Rebecca Williams. I am Rebecca Williams. And I'm also Ruth Bennett. I'm both. And I'm finally ready to stop pretending otherwise." The room erupted again. Gasps, exclamations, people pulling out phones, the music journalist asking if he could interview her, others wanting to shake her hand, to tell her they'd always wondered what happened to her, to say they were so glad she was okay. It was overwhelming, but it was also in a strange way freeing. The secret she'd carried for 30 years was finally out. And the world didn't end. She didn't fall apart. Instead, she felt lighter, more whole, more herself than she'd been since David died. The weeks following the recital were a whirlwind. The music journalist wrote a piece for the Tribune classical music legend, Rebecca Williams, found living quiet. Life in Iowa. The story went viral. Music websites picked it up. Classical music forums exploded with discussion. Some were angry she'd abandoned her career. Others were sympathetic. Most were just happy she was alive and well. Interviews were requested. She declined most of them. But she did agree to one with NPR where she told her story. About David. About the grief. About needing to disappear to survive. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from around the world, former colleagues, fellow musicians, fans who'd loved her recordings, young pianists who'd been inspired by her, all expressing support, understanding, many sharing their own stories of loss and grief and the long road to healing. Old friends reached out, people she hadn't spoken to in 30 years. At first it was awkward, painful, but gradually she found herself reconnecting. rebuilding bridges she'd burned when she disappeared. But the most important change was in Maplewood itself. The people of this small town who'd known her only as quiet Miss Ruth embraced her fully. They didn't treat her differently, didn't suddenly expect more of her. They just loved her as they always had, but now with a deeper understanding of who she was. Ruth continued teaching at the community center. The kids still called her Miss Ruth. She still patiently guided small fingers through scales and simple songs. But now, occasionally, at the end of a lesson, she'd play something for them. Really play. Show them what was possible, what music could be at its highest level. And several times a year she performed. Small concerts at the community center. Nothing fancy, nothing that required extensive travel or put her back in the high-pressure world she'd left behind. Just sharing her gift, honoring David's memory, keeping the music alive. She played at a benefit concert for the local hospital, at a wedding for one of her former students, at a memorial service for a beloved community member. Each time she poured herself into the music, and each time it hurt a little less. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer consumed her. One day in spring, Ruth was working in her garden when a car pulled up. A young black woman stepped out, maybe 25 years old, nervous but determined. "Miss Williams," she said, "I hope I'm not intruding. My name is Jasmine. I'm a piano student at Juilliard. I had to meet you. Your story, what you did, coming back to music after such loss. It's inspired me, made me believe I can keep going even when things are hard." Ruth invited her in. They talked for hours about music, about grief, about perseverance. When Jasmine left, Ruth felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Not just surviving, but contributing, helping the next generation the way people had helped her. She started doing more of that. Mentoring young musicians remotely. Answering questions. Providing encouragement. Sharing not just technical knowledge, but wisdom earned through pain and perseverance. One evening, as the sun set over Maplewood, Ruth sat at her piano. Not to practice, not to teach, just to play. For herself, for the joy of it. She played Chopin, the Nocturne, David's favorite. But this time the memories didn't break her. They filled her with warmth, with gratitude. Yes, she'd lost him. That pain would never fully heal. But she'd had him, loved him, been loved by him, and that she realized was something to celebrate, not just mourn. The music flowed from her fingers, beautiful, bittersweet, true. And as the last notes faded into the quiet of her small living room, Ruth smiled. She was whole again, not unchanged, not unmarked by her journey, but whole. Ruth and Rebecca, teacher and performer, the woman who'd hidden, and the woman who'd finally come home. She'd spent 30 years believing that music had died with David. But she'd been wrong. Music hadn't died. It had just been waiting for her to be ready, waiting for her to realize that honoring David didn't mean burying her gifts. It meant using them, sharing them, letting the beauty they'd both loved live on through her fingers, her heart, her soul. Some stories take decades to tell. Some wounds take years to heal. Some journeys toward wholeness require us to lose ourselves completely before we can find our way back. Ruth Bennett's story, Rebecca Williams' story. They're the same story, a story about love and loss, about hiding and seeking, about the courage it takes to let yourself be broken, and the even greater courage it takes to piece yourself back together. Music saved Ruth once when she was a young girl in Philadelphia who needed an escape and a dream. It sustained her through years of dedication and hard work. It brought her the love of her life. And then when that life was shattered, music became too painful to bear. So she put it away, locked it up, pretended it didn't exist. But music is patient. It waited. And when Ruth was finally ready, when a curious student and a caring community helped her open that locked door, the music was still there, waiting to heal her, to make her whole, to remind her that grief and joy can coexist, that we can honor those we've lost by continuing to live, to create, to share our gifts with the world. If this story has moved you, perhaps it's because you recognize something in it. Maybe you've buried parts of yourself, talents, dreams, passions. Maybe grief or fear or circumstance has convinced you that those parts of you are gone forever. But they're not. They're waiting. Just like the music waited for Ruth, waiting for you to be ready, waiting for the moment when you decide that hiding is no longer serving you, that it's time to risk being whole again, even if wholeness comes with pain. Ruth's journey reminds us that it's never too late to reclaim what we've lost, never too late to share our gifts, never too late to honor the people we've loved by living fully, authentically, courageously. If you found meaning in this story, if it resonated with something in your own life, please share it. Let others know that second chances are real, that healing is possible, that the parts of ourselves we think are dead might just be sleeping, waiting for us to wake them up. And remember, wherever you are in your own journey, whatever you've had to bury to survive, whatever gifts you've locked away to protect yourself from pain, they're still there, still yours, still waiting for the day when you're ready to bring them back into the light. Thank you for listening to Ruth's story. May it inspire you to write your own next chapter, the one where you stop hiding and start living fully again.